Well, Israel appears to be ramping up military operations targeting security threats in Syria. We're already seeing a chorus of international outrage. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Egypt are just some of the regional neighbors that are accusing Israel of exploiting the current situation in Syria for its own benefit. In the meantime, Western powers are urging restraint. And joining us now is former senior advisor in the U.S. State Department, Hazem Alghabra. Hazem, no matter what, Israel was bound to receive backlash for really any advances into the buffer zone or strikes in Syria, despite what could pose clear security threats to its own sovereignty. What do you make of Israel's military decision-making at this point, and whether or not it's a good move going forward?
Good afternoon. First of all, myself and other analysts here in Washington are convinced this is not an operation that was decided overnight. This is something that was planned for a month. Obviously, irrelevant if the Assad regime fell or not, there was a need by Israel to destroy an air force and weapons that do threaten Israel from Syria under the Assad regime. Obviously, what happened in the past few days may have expedited that decision, but obviously the arsenal in Syria poses a threat, has always posed a threat to Israel. That said, the criticism here is there is a bit of a failure of messaging and maybe a failure of imagination from the Israeli side. The messaging should have been clear. I personally see a silver lining to this. The Syrian people do not need weapons at this point. They need to build a nation. They do not need to be engaged using weapons to engage in wars internally or with each other or with neighboring countries or other nations. However, the messaging did not exist from Israel, and the narrative was hijacked by Qatar's Al-Jazeera and Iran's Mayadeen TV, and they went on air claiming that Israel is making moves to take over Syria and take over territory in Syria, even though we don't believe that's the case here. The failure of imagination here is it seems that the atmosphere in Israel is that HTS and these elements have taken over the country irreversibly. I do not think that's the situation here. I think the Syria as a nation is still in play. Israel is emerging as a superpower in that region. It should not look at what's happening as a threat only, but as an opportunity to win the hearts and minds of the Syrian people and be an active participant in rebuilding Syria. I think the Syrian people are sick and tired of the war and are looking for partners and friends. Right. And remember, the main force that has been telling the Syrian people Israel is your enemy is gone. It was the Syrian regime. It was the Assad regime. Also, the Syrian people share a narrative right now with the Jewish people. Obviously, we have our own Auschwitz in Syria named Sidnaya prison. So there is more in common right now than the average person may imagine. And finally, I would really, really like to see Syrian, Israeli Jewish rabbis that were exiled from Syria in the 90s go back to visit Damascus in the near future.
Now, so far, HTS and the other rebel groups involved in the overthrow of the Assad regime have not explicitly threatened Israel. We have seen some members of these groups calling to continue their rampage all the way to Jerusalem, all the way to Mecca. Can we expect that to change? I mean, how worried should Israel be about this? Of course, we know that HTS is still designated a terror group according to the U.S., the UN, other international powers. And can we expect this to change if they do stick by their promises not to implement draconian Islamist laws?
It's a pray for the best, prepare for the worst kind of situation right now. We don't know. I don't think they know. I don't think Ahmad Shara, the leader of the group, knows how much grip that he has over the group at large and the other fighting groups and their interests. I think the messaging has been good so far, especially on foreign relations and relations with neighbors. But as you've also mentioned correctly, there are voices within that group that are pure jihadist voices. And unfortunately, these groups have not really governed before, not fully at least. They have a very limited experience in Idlib, at least Ashar does. But governing a nation the size of Syria is a complex matter. We hope that we can support them in governing, not necessarily Shara, but whomever becomes the leadership and the civilian leadership of the country. So people will get more involved and interested in the success of governing than fighting, because a lot of these groups we've seen when they take over power, they go into perpetual fighting. The Iranian regime is one of those examples. They took power. They failed to build a good economy, a modern economy, a modern education system, and they seem always more interested in continuing a fight they started decades ago.
Ultimately, is there any type of consensus by the Syrian public at this point as to who they would want to see lead the country?
The Syrian people are incredibly tired. They're fatigued. They're left with a destroyed country. Syria, make no mistake, Syria is a highly damaged country. It's a destroyed country when it comes to the economy, when it comes to society, when it comes to politics. This country has been run on corruption for the past several decades. So I think they are interested in peace right now. I mean, who wouldn't be after so much war?
Right.
I think they want economic stability, and I tell you right now, immediately, they need heating fuel because the country is running out of diesel fuel for home heating, and winter is here.